Well, thank you for the opportunity to present goPassport to the SATSA Inbound Tourism Group in South Africa. Matt McKinley is my name. I'm coming to you from Cairns on Australia's Great Barrier Reef, way up in the north. I do apologise, behind me you'll see Australian cricket jersey. We are avid sportsmen here, and we love our competition with our fellow South African sportsmen, and the competition's always great. But we are in these times where we are suffering. And like you, our businesses are not firing, and we don't have that capacity to make a living on our inbound business. So tonight what we wanted to do is show you a little bit about how we've been addressing this problem and how we, through control, both of technology and clinical, plus through managed itineraries, and that is the management of logistics through inbound tour operators, that we can create a no-gaps approach to inbound tourism recovering and starting up again in this era of COVID in the new world. So before we get started, I just want to share a little story with you. Like many of you, I was on my way to ITB. We have a beautiful piece of technology which is used by tour operators across Europe, which basically supports them in presenting beautiful documentation for their customers to travel with. And we have significant companies in the US and Canada as well. 2 days out from my arrival into Berlin, I received this message. And in this message, it said, amongst its requirements, the authority stipulated that each participant would need to prove to Messi Berlin that they were not from a designated risk area or had not been in contact with a person from a risk area. It is not possible for Messi Berlin to satisfy these requirements overall. As soon as I read this, I knew our world had changed. How were we going to be able to demonstrate to the health authorities the health status of individual travellers coming into a country? That would be the next great form of control that was needed to ensure that our industry could continue to progress in this current era. So the first thing I did is I returned back to Australia and I called a great old friend of mine, Dr. John Shepherd. Now, Dr. John has a long history in infectious diseases, and in fact he supported Australia's, New Zealand and UK's response to Ebola in Africa. Now when I spoke to John, and this is, bear in mind, this is very early in March, he described to me everything that was going to happen to our industry, and everything did actually happen, and he was 100% right. But then he said one thing to me. He said, this is the fourth epidemic of my career, but this is the first where the potential to use digital technology to enhance the traditional methods of public health controls to rapidly and efficiently minimise risk. And I said to him, John, if that's the case, how are we going to do it? How can we get our industry back going? Because it's not about the when. It's not about when borders are going to open. It's about how. And this is the process that we went through. And so from that particular statement, I then was determined to get a consortium of leaders together. And tonight I just want to introduce you to some of those leaders. Unfortunately, Dr. John can't be with us, but I'll introduce you to our team, and they're here tonight with us. First of all, I'll introduce you to Klaus Felsche. Klaus, would you like to give a little bit about your background and your partnership here with goPassport?
Sure, Matt. Thank you for this opportunity to have a quick chat to you and give you an insight into some of the opportunities. I had spent something like 26 years in the Australian Army and then joined Australia's Immigration and Border Protection Organisation in 2001. There I developed the Internet Electronic Travel Authority and then found myself moving to Jakarta, where I was basically involved in dealing with integrity processes for our visa processes and to deal with people smuggling issues. I returned back to Canberra in 2005 and built our global secure immigration intelligence systems. And in 2009, started to set up the first immigration advanced analytics capability. Most of our focus was on developing initially our analytics-driven border risk identification system, the first of its kind in the world. And then we moved on to produce what was called the next generation border security system, which included an analytics-driven risk system for visa processing. We deployed all of that, and we deployed black box versions of that risk systems in the private cloud with CETA. I joined Alpha Zeta back in 2006 because I thought they had an interesting model for providing sort of consultancy services around the world. And when I was called earlier this year to join goPassport, I knew that this was a great opportunity to actually apply a lot of my experience and knowledge to try and build the most robust, most comprehensive and the most efficient system that we could possibly do, and again, open up travel for the rest of the world. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Klaus. Mark, would you like to give us a bit of your background?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And welcome to the SATSA team. My name is Mark Radford. I'm normally based up in Singapore, but I'm currently down in Perth at the moment, just across the way from you guys. I'm the CEO of a company called Noesis, and we do a real-time billing platform, and that's kind of the background of all my experience in technology has been in real-time systems. And this is the core bit of technology that's very mature. It's installed in a lot of very large telcos around the place, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But that's kind of my contribution to the group, is that helping with that core technology piece that makes it quite unique. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Mark. And Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Olsen. I'm the CEO of Alpha Zeta. So Alpha Zeta is a data science and advanced analytics consulting company. There's 800 of us around the world in 6 different countries. And we do a lot of analytics for clients like GE Aviation, banks and insurers around risk management. And I think my contribution has really been looking at, we know how we use data in other industries to manage risk, and how can we bring those same thoughts and same processes to managing travel and the virus, so that we can have people traveling safely.
Thank you, Tony. So what I'll do now is I'll just play you a short video to give you a bit of background to what goPassport is.
How can Australia restart our industry sectors that support international education, business, tourism and migrant workers? How can we do this at scale with a high degree of risk management, control and audit? Introducing goPassport, a patented real-time monitor, audit and alert process providing visibility of visiting non-residents through a powerful combination of advanced analytics, itinerary monitoring and rule-based robotics. Before a non-resident leaves their home, goPassport uses advanced analytics to prioritize the risk of their country of origin. A low-risk infection status allows the non-resident to review the risk profile of the available flights and aircraft type for safe passage to Australia. The traveller follows the guided policy compliance steps, including pre-travel COVID-19 testing, travel itinerary reporting and risk reduction behaviour to ensure they are eligible to board a plane. On arrival, goPassport monitors the traveller itinerary, ensuring compliance against the government's requirements such as quarantine by utilising real-time geofencing, biometric and location-based verified logins. During this time, goPassport monitors the non-resident's health, providing access to any support services required, such as mental health and telehealth, and making sure their status and progress is shared with their personal support network. Then, when travelling in Australia, goPassport monitors the itinerary pathway, tracks the visitor's self-declared health status, and generates alerts should the traveller trigger non-compliance. In the event of an illness or status change in their pathway, goPassport automates the next best action procedure, escalating rapid contact tracking policy and telehealth management, vastly reducing time to respond for containment of spread. The accumulation of trusted data profile and machine learning insights, policies and programs can be adjusted to reflect true risk management and provide accurate data-enabled decisions. goPassport is the clinical and technology solution to support Australia's economic recovery through rebuilding global education, business, tourism, and migrant workers and their significant contribution to jobs and stability. goPassport ensures the Australian public are safe.
I'd like now to introduce Klaus to talk a bit about what the problem is with inbound international travellers. Klaus?
Thanks, Matt. Yes, as you would know, if you're in the travel business and you've sent lots of people to Australia before, then you would know that Australia has one of the world's best border management systems. We link visas, flight boarding authorities, and on-arrival processing to provide an effective, fast, and seamless processing chain that relies on real-time data moving from one place to another. This has effectively protected Australia from criminals, corruption, threats to national security, etc. COVID-19, however, has exposed significant gaps. We don't have any visibility of the travellers' experiences or travel between the time that they get their visa and the time that they board a flight for Australia. The time period between those could be months or even years. We don't have any visibility, particularly in the critical 14 days leading up to the travel when infections can occur. The person who then arrives in Australia, and we have lots of controls there, we can screen them at the border and do all sorts of management processes, but then they go off the radar again until their departure. So there are significant gaps in the visibility of the traveller, and of most concern are the gaps before they get on the plane from their point of origin. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Klaus. Do you want to talk a bit about how we solved that using goPassport?
I'm glad you said we've solved it because that's the aim of this game. So what we try to do is create visibility of the traveller before they get to Australia, because we believe that if we manage most of the risks before they get on the plane, then the chances of them bringing any virus into Australia is going to be minimised. So the first thing we do is we have an ability to assess the place where they start their travel overseas. We do comprehensive assessments of risks in countries based on publicly available and other sources of data around the extent of, in this case, COVID-19. We then can record any test events that the person undertakes. For example, COVID-19 tests. We can record inoculations when they become available. And we can see the person for at least the 14 days before they get on the plane to make sure that they haven't inadvertently exposed themselves to any risk of infection. When they travel to Australia, so before they get on the plane, they will have what we call the health status flag, which gives them the green light to get on the aircraft. And we then see them again when they land. So at this stage, the immigration and border authorities are all aware of the person's health status and can manage the person appropriately. When the person arrives, if they're going to go to a quarantine or self-isolation event, then we can manage that and keep an eye on them and make sure that they actually stay in that location for the required time. And if they don't, then we can actually do something about that. We can then guide the person past any events, for example, bushfires or places where there is an infection outbreak. We can guide them through active alerts in real time to the traveller to make sure that they don't inadvertently expose themselves to risk while they're in Australia. And then when they return back home, we can make sure that we stay in contact with them for a short period to let them know if they inadvertently were exposed to any risk on their way home. So as you can see, we have completely filled in all the gaps that existed before in our traveller pathway.
Thank you, Klaus. I'll hand it over to Tony now just to talk about that visibility and the 3 stages that we work through to reach this level of control.
Thanks, Matt. So as Klaus was saying, the goal here is to try and get people moving without any cases of coronavirus, and we don't want anyone arriving in a country that turns positive with coronavirus. So The concept for that is we probably won't get to 0 cases ever with moving people, but the goal is to design a system that can get us to 99.999%, or 5 nines as we call it in the industry, which is the same sort of thinking that we use for keeping aircraft moving and other things in high risk. So we use 3 different components or 3 stages to manage that risk. The first one is moving the risk offshore as much as possible. And that's around using advanced analytics to understand the infection rates in the different countries and helping design appropriate policies for moving people between the 2 countries. The other part to it is what we want to do is, instead of letting people get on the plane without testing, we want to push all of the testing and monitoring of the people offshore before they get on the plane. So we test them, and then when they get on the plane, we have a high degree of certainty that they're already healthy and they don't carry the virus. The second stage to that is, once we've designed that policy, is making sure that people comply. And this is where the app comes in. So we have the app downloaded. We want to make sure that they've downloaded the app 14 days prior to departure. And that's so that we make sure that people don't go to an infected geography and then come back again before they get on the plane. We know that they've been in a safe place. And then we manage their tests so that we give them a way to upload and verify that they've been tested and they're healthy before they get on the plane. The third step to this is we want to have the ability to monitor and escalate in real time so that we track now the risk. We can look at the individual, we can see whether they've complied with all the steps, and then we can alert and tell people, both the traveller themselves and the authorities or the travel agent, when any risks come. And that goes all the way from when they first download the app, all the way through their flight journey, and then into arrival, and trace them through until they go back home again. Thank you, Matt. So just coming back to this concept of trying to get rid of all the risks, the way in which we do this is take all of the pieces that cause risk in the trip and analyse them in great detail. So we start at the top with country risk. So the simple concept there is, if you're in a heavily infected country versus you're coming from somewhere where there is hardly any virus, you carry a certain amount of risk. By understanding where people have been in the 14 days prior, we can eliminate that risk. We can also then do symptom screening, so we can prompt using the real-time alerts for people to tell us, are they feeling healthy? Do they have any symptoms? We can monitor them as they go through their COVID tests so that we get a positive, we get a confirmation that they've done a test and the test is negative. In the future, when there's immunisation, we can also monitor to whether they've been immunised. And it doesn't stop there. So the next part is they're going to get on the plane. We know that they're healthy when they get on the plane, but there's a considerable amount of risk on the plane itself. So let's start with the aircraft type. Each aircraft type carries a different risk. It's not a fact that you cannot get sick on a plane. Absolutely, you can get infected. If you're on the newer aircraft, let's say you're on a 787 or an A350, these planes have the latest HEPA filtration systems, and they are a better experience than older aircraft. If you're on a 747, it's a very large aircraft and the risk is higher. So each aircraft type has a risk, each airline carries a risk, and then the flight itself carries a risk. For example, the Middle East is one of the most infected parts of the world at the moment. If you've got a transit through the Middle East and you're transiting there for a long time, that's going to carry additional risk. So we effectively can manage and before somebody gets on the plane, give them the optimal flight path into the country so that they manage all risk. And then when they arrive, we can also track them through the quarantine process using geofencing to make sure they're in quarantine. In Australia, we've had a lot of people break out of quarantine and we can detect them and track that. And that same technology means that into the future, we can also ensure that people self-isolate or quarantine in their home country before they get on the plane, if that's required as well. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'll hand you over now to Mark to talk a little bit about the real-time technology that drives the guide, monitor and alert system.
Terrific. Thanks, Matt. So I think just to make one thing clear is that we have lots of good ideas as a consortium on how things are managed, but at the end of the day, that pathway and those rules and regulations about country entry and quarantine, et cetera, are out of our hands. So industry is going to make some of those decisions, governments are going to make others, et cetera. So it's our job to capture that pathway, whatever it is. So we envisage that there could be different conditions for people travelling from different countries. Say into South Africa, there could be green corridors established where there's less quarantine. There could be different visa classes and different applications, home isolation versus quarantine, etc. So we've got to be able to flexibly capture all those different pathways that could be running in parallel as we kind of continue that journey. And having done 2 weeks of quarantine myself, it is a bit of an onerous process, and a lot of the time you're just kind of not sure of what the next step is. So the capability to very simply kind of transform that policy that is applicable to that traveller, to make that a very simple step-by-step and be able to guide them, we think is a key part of the goPassport program. And of course, then the real-time monitoring kicks in there. So if I have got quarantine or I am required to do tests pre-travel, whatever that is, the system automatically recognises that process has been done by time, by geolocation, by all the factors of monitoring we have in the system. So we can actually make sure that those steps are being followed. In the case of where they're not, it's our job, again, to be able to automatically to raise an alarm, and that might be just a notification back to the traveller. That could be a notification to the travel manager. It could be, a much more onerous alert to quarantine managers, et cetera. So the idea is to be able to put, again, a smooth pathway of compliance that's easily interpreted by the traveller, but has, full and automatic escalation and management procedures already in there. So what we're really trying to achieve here as well is to be able to do this at scale. So I think it's okay at the moment where we've got maybe hundreds of travellers, entering into a port or a destination, but we really have the vision that we need to be talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and indeed millions over time. So we need this degree of control and automation in the system. Thanks, Matt. So just going back to what Matt mentioned when we first kind of got our heads together, there was a couple of things that we recognised, in applying the technology to this. And one was that we couldn't really be building new stuff. We couldn't really be building platforms and kind of irking out ideas from the get-go. We had to have a look of how we could get mature technologies and applications and be able to adapt them to this situation. And that's basically what we've done with the 4 major components that goPassport covers. So the first one, which Tony's already touched on at some length, is that just that front-end analytics. We believe this is a very important step. Basically, if I can reduce my risk by 600-fold before someone even arrives in the country, there's very much obvious benefits there. And then the core part of the Noesis technology, which is the real-time policy engine, again designed to kind of operate at scale. So this system has been around for some time. It was first developed back in 2013. It lives in some of the largest telcos around Southeast Asia, and indeed here in Telstra in Australia. And one of our largest installations in Indonesia. It monitors 35 million real-time users on the platform. and ingests just over 4.5 billion records a day. So we're looking to deploy, very scalable and very robust technologies to back this system up. And then we also have out of Matt's stable is the DigiGo app, which we've adapted, and this is our front end. This is our interface for the user, and also provides us with some of the geo tracking, which again are features that we already have in the app. So there is some adaptation of those base features, but basically this is a technology that again exists in scale already. And then our status portals and our dashboarding system, we use a lot of standard dashboarding technologies here. And of course, there will have to be customizations according to who that end user is, if that's an industry group or a government or border security, etc. But again, technologies that we're very familiar with. So yeah, we very much like the idea that we've got these old, experienced, sometimes bald heads, working on this problem, but backed by a proven technology in that mix. Thanks, Matty.
Thank you so much, Mark. So what does this mean for you? Your inbound industry is stalled. How can we get it going? Well, there's two components here. Obviously, goPassport is demonstrating a clinical and a technology approach to control. But the other side of that is managed itineraries. That is the complete management of a customer from the time they depart their homes to when they arrive back again. And that represents enormous amounts of control. And this is the story that governments want to have. They want to know that those visitors are coming in are going to be managed and that they're visible and that they will, and if there's a chance of compromise, that they're going to be managed appropriately without any compromise or any risk to government. So with that managed itineraries and goPassport, it's that 5 nines approach to risk management and control. And we've learned this from Tony. It's that how can we make this a 99.99% control process? So what goPassport provides is new tools for the industry to manage risk as presented by international travellers. So we support offshore agents so that they can manage the risk offshore. And that's through the COVID testing, the pre-departure isolation, location, trip risk analytics. And then for that capacity to report their itinerary. And to have a pre-reported itinerary gives great confidence to government to know that where these people may be and that they're not going into areas that are of compromise or high risk. So a reported itinerary allows for that safe monitoring and the alerts platform to ensure compliance. This new tool also guides the users along their pathway for policy compliance. You can demonstrate this. It gives you visibility and the capacity to communicate and management portals for both your offshore agents who have the ownership of the client, to the ITOs that manage the itineraries, all the way through to suppliers. For suppliers have that capacity to have visibility of the health status of that particular traveller. We are in the process of proving this technology by running a number of small-scale pilot group movements. And these are really important to be able to demonstrate that we can get to this 99.99%. But the most important thing is that from these small pilot group movements, that we can then move this whole process at scale. And that can be done at volume without reducing any form of control in the process. So in summary here, the control processes that you already have in place in managed itineraries is a complete parcel already to be able to support the opening of your borders. And in conjunction with goPassport, the technology and the clinical process, then you have that opportunity to demonstrate to government that you are safe. So Klaus, I might ask you to talk a little bit about how goPassport can help government.
Enrolls in goPassport, they start off with a health status flag, and if they're that reflects initially the location risk that they're from. So if you're coming from a high risk location, your initial flag might well be red, but then you go through a whole series of processes to mitigate most of the risk, and before you actually turn up to board the aircraft, your status flag should be green. Now that information is made available automatically and in real time to the Australian border authorities, and they load it into their advanced passenger processing system. So if the flag is not green, then the person is unlikely to be given the authority to board the aircraft. And that happens automatically. There's no human interaction required at this stage. We simply provide the information to the border authorities. They then go and press the right buttons automatically at their end and control who can get on the aircraft. That status will be maintained throughout the entire travel of the traveller. The other organisations that are interested in the travellers are, of course, the health services in Australia. So what we provide them with is complete visibility of travellers coming into their particular port, so in their particular state. And they have a portal which means that they can see this health status of every single traveller. And if that person has to go and serve some time in self-isolation and quarantine, the portal will allow the health services to manage that. Should a traveller come in contact with some infection or should become infected themselves, then that person can be tracked by us, and we can provide contact tracing information to the health services to allow effective management of any contacts. The final thing is that for the whole process, we have a solid, proven, trustworthy record of the audit compliance along the whole pathway of the traveller at every stage of the path. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So that draws us to the end of our presentation here tonight. You've probably gathered that this has been pre-recorded, and I'm sure you've got many hundreds of questions that you would like to ask us. We're open to answer those questions, and we'll engage the next process through David and the team at SATSA. But we wish you all the best with your AGM, and also look forward to the next conversation that we can have together to work out how we can support each other to get our borders open and to get our beautiful industries back on track, to get our people's livelihoods returned, and to demonstrate and give people all over the world that opportunity to enrich their lives through leisure travel, which we do. So thank you, everyone.